What's up guys, Doomwake here, and welcome to another video on the channel. With the Pioneer Regional Championships fast approaching in Atlanta this weekend, and I believe the Canadian ones I think are the following weeks as well, this is the best time to be looking into Pioneer, and I will myself be traveling to Atlanta. I'm actually leaving this Thursday. However, I'm not actually qualified for the regional championships. I'm going solely to play the last chance qualifiers, but the format's still the same. They are going to be Pioneer, and thus I've been doing extensive testing over the past couple of weeks. I've tried all of the, the traditional metagame archetypes, the tier 1 archetypes, tried basically all of those. There's some stuff that I've been labbing, which we'll save that maybe for after the regional championship, but stay tuned for that. There's going to be some cool stuff coming. And let me just tell you, the format's maybe a little bit different than you think it is. So let's just say that. But anyways, what I wanted to do today is to kind of showcase you guys some of the decks that you should expect to be playing against if you are participating in the last chance qualifiers and or the regional championships in the next coming weeks. Just to kind of give you a snapshot of the metagame, I've selected 7 decks to highlight here to kind of we're just going to go over each of them briefly, individually, strengths and weaknesses, stuff like that, and just to kind of prepare you for decks that you should expect to play against, and potentially decks that you might even want to play yourself. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, and the first deck that I have for you here is one that has been picking up a lot of steam as of late, and this is the Karuga Fires deck. Fires of Invention is a card that has been, played in Standard before. There's been some stints in Pioneer as well, but this deck really didn't kind of take over and really become a big player in the metagame until the recent set that gave us both Leyline Binding and Temporary Lockdown. And the really cool thing about this deck is it has, even though it's a Karuga deck, which means that in theory you can only play cards that cost 3 or more mana value, you actually have 8 turn 2 plays technically between Leyline Binding and Bonecrusher Giant. So you get to play this kind of Fires, obviously Fires with Companions is extremely powerful because you can pay 3 to pick it up and then cast the Companion in the same turn, and it allows you to kind of get around the deck building restriction of Karuga and also still have some 2-mana interaction. And also you have one of the better sweepers in the format in Temporary Lockdown, which is incredible against mono green. You can clean up a couple of Llanowar Elves, maybe an Oath of Nissa, and even a Woeful Haven. That buys you a lot of time to get you to Fires and your more powerful haste plays. A very common line in this deck is turn 3 Fable, turn 4 Fires of Invention plus something else, doesn't really matter. Turn 5, flip the Fable, play one of your 6 haste creatures, activate it. If it's a Cavalier Flame, your backside of your Fable gains haste, copy the Cavalier, get another trigger that way, and you can get a lot of damage out of nowhere. So, this deck has good 2-mana interaction, has some decent sweepers, and some decent ways to close out the game. So strengths and weaknesses. Now that being said, even though Temporary Lockdown is a card that can buy you a lot of time, I think this deck is not the best against mono green. It does kind of require you to have that early interaction, a Bonecrusher Giant or a Leyline Binding for an elf. Maybe you have to have a turn 3 Temporary Lockdown in order to compete, because the rest of your deck is just not really competing and matching up that well with a lot of what mono green is doing. They're putting a lot of stuff onto the battlefield. They can present enough blockers to make it most likely so where you won't be able to kill them in one shot with Cavalier or even Kenrith sometimes. They pretty much ignore Omnath for the most part. The life gain doesn't matter. Sometimes the boosted mana can get you places, but yeah, I think the mono green matchup is a little tough, and I think on the draw, just in a general sense, when you don't have any 1-mana interaction, if your opponent just plays a Llanowar Elf, you just have no recourse against that when you're on the draw on turn 1, unlike a deck, like, say, Rakdos that has Fatal Push, or some other decks that have Fiery Impulse and other red removal spells. So I think this deck is decent at going over the top, but the issue is it is a little clunky, I think is the best way to put it. So that's kind of my thoughts of the Karuga Fires deck. All right, and the second deck that we want to take a look at here is the Abzan Greasefang deck. Now, this is a deck that's been around for a decent while now, ever since the printing of Greasefang. Just being able to, set up a turn 3 Greasefang, put Parhelion onto the battlefield, it gains haste, attack your opponent for a lot of damage. This specific list is more of experimental, because I still haven't gotten to play with Diabolic Intent, as it's not legal yet. But the concept is mostly the same. You know, some people, this is basically the same list that I copied from, I think, one of the challenges, except I just cut Eldritch Evolution for Diabolic Intent. But the concept is pretty simple. Just you have a lot of ways to put stuff into the graveyard: Stitcher Supplier, Rafine's Informant, Insider, Wayfinder, along with Grizzly Salvage to bin a Parhelion. That's step 1. Step 2, find a Greasefang. Step 3, profit. Pretty easy stuff here. This deck, I think, it's weird against mono green because you have draws that they can't really interact with. You have, you know, a lot of fast, like the turn 3 Greasefang draws when you're on the play. A lot of the time, they can't really compete with that. The one thing they do have is Beseiju, so they can essentially buy themselves the turn by Beseijuing your Parhelion, so you can't attack with it, and then maybe slam a card and shut the door. Because as you'll notice, this deck doesn't really have a way to answer Karn game 1. So that's something you might want to look towards if you are playing this deck, is some way to answer Karn game 1, because if that card's in the battlefield, you basically are 0%. I mean, you're not going to be able to attack with 4/3s and, you know, 3/2s against the board of Cavalier of Thorns and Old Growth Trolls. So strengths and weaknesses, I think this deck is... this is kind of feels like Dredge to me in, you know, Modern and Legacy, where it's a very good game 1 deck. It has a lot of good matchups game 1, especially when it's on the play. It just gets to do things that a lot of decks can't really compete with. And also the premier removal spells of the format are Fatal Push and Bone Crusher Giant. Bone Crusher Giant doesn't kill Greasefang, and Fatal Push has a little bit of trouble. There's not always a, you know, it's not like Modern where you have free revolt triggers. So that's the one thing about this deck. It's going to win. You're going to win a lot of game 1s with this deck, just plain and simple. It gets dicey in the post-board games, though, because, you know, you'll notice a lot of decks have Leyline of the Void. Some decks have Rest in Peace. People are prepared to answer the graveyard because Phoenix is such a prevalent part of the format, as well as this deck is. So you kind of have to... The games 2 and 3 get a little trickier and sometimes a little scrappy, which is why you'll notice I have some copies of Shieldred in the sideboard. That's kind of like my my anti-graveyard hit of sorts. So I think overall this is like kind of fine against green on the play. I think Rakdos can be a little tricky because, you know, even though they don't... Bone Crusher Giant doesn't touch your stuff, they're even main decking up Braids now, so that can be a little tough. Phoenix is kind of a nightmare. They have, you know, 3 to 4 copies of Lightning Axe and Fiery Impulse, so good luck against that. And yeah, that is pretty much the Greasefang deck, so let's move on to the next deck. Well, I would be remiss to talk about the Pioneer format without at least mentioning the mono green deck. You will play against this deck a lot. I would... You know, I don't know about percentage of the room-wise. My guesstimate is probably somewhere between 15 to 20%. It could be higher than that, and that's an incredibly high number. You will play against this multiple times in a tournament if you show up to an RC or an LCQ. There's not much else to say. This deck is extremely powerful. The one thing that I will note is people are going to be prepared for mono green. There's the thing about the green deck is like the spaces are so tight. You basically have 3 flex spots in the main deck, which is the Lovestruck Beast. Everything else is accounted for, and then the sideboard you maybe have like 2 to 3 flex spots for Karn targets. I'm not sure about some of these newer ones like Woodcaller Automaton and the Stasis Coffin. But yeah, this deck doesn't really have a lot of wiggle room, so you're really just kind of hoping that your draw lines up well, and a lot of the time that will, but I think this deck does struggle against some of the more hyper-aggressive decks like Mono White. I think the Gruul decks that are playing 4 copies of a Cron War main deck, which we'll get to in a little bit, those can be a little bit tricky. Phoenix, if they're playing multiple copies of Thing in the Ice, can be a tough matchup for green, but at the end of the day, even the matchups that are bad for green, the green deck is just going to do the green deck things sometimes, like when you have turn 1 Llanowar Elf, turn 2 Old Growth Troll, turn 3 Cavalier. Sometimes people just can't beat those draws, no matter how good their draw is. So the green deck is going to do the green deck things. What I will say is that, you know, if you want to maybe hedge yourself a little bit better towards mono green, maybe some more early spot removal, killing their elves and killing their Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves really slows them down. If they can't play a 3-mana spell on turn 2 and they don't have a Wolfula Haven, sometimes their draw is just too slow, especially if you can kind of back that up a little bit. So yes, this is the green deck. I think it has, you know, there are some, like I said, some bad matchups. Mono White, I think, is one of the tougher matchups. But yeah, this deck is just really good. Expect to play against it a lot. I don't have a lot else to say, but yeah, this is the green deck. And moving on, we have Rakdos Midrange. This deck was extremely popular, I would say, about a month ago, and it's kind of funny because I think the reason that this deck got so popular was the printing of Liliana the Veil, and you notice we now have no copies of that card in the deck list. Excuse me. But yeah, I think this is pretty much Misplaced Ginger is the person who's been playing this deck the most, and I believe he has been a proponent of cutting Liliana, and I agree. I don't think Liliana is that great right now. It's really bad against the decks that are going super low to the ground, like Mono White. It's not that great against Gruul. It is, I think, not great against Mono Green, especially on the draw. Sometimes in the play you can get an elf, but as soon as they play an Old Growth Troll, you can't downtick your Liliana. So I understand the cutting of Liliana, and this is, again, you know, I'm including some Brothers War cards in here. These are more of like this specific list. I would say this is more experimental. The one Gix, the one Go for the Throne, the two Shadow. So don't necessarily take this exact list as you know, as the Bible. But just some stuff that I might want to try out in Rakdos. But yes, this deck is kind of the Jund of the format. It's basically, the joke is it's 50-50 against everything, which I would say is mostly true. I think, you know, you can gain some percentage points in a number of matchups with your sideboard cards. Like you'll notice this list has 3 Extinction Events. That's specifically for Mono Green, along with the Lifebane zombies. You can, you know, basically, this deck is extremely flexible in terms of if there is a very specific matchup you want to beat, you can just sideboard 6 to 7 cards and you can beat that matchup. You will have to sacrifice some spots in other matchups, so be careful of that. As far as, you know, matchup spread is concerned, like I said, it's basically 50-50 against everything. I don't think this deck has any horrendously bad matchups, maybe outside of Lotus Field, but I don't expect a lot of people to show up with Lotus Field because I think specifically the printing of the Stone Brain really makes Lotus Field kind of a sketchy proposition. So I would be wary of that. But other than maybe like that specific combo deck, I don't like this deck against Mono Green when it's on the play and has like the Harvester in the Trespasser draws. You can kind of get under them, especially with a timely removal spell for a Cavalier, or maybe post board you have like the Extinction Events for the Cavs and the Thorns, or excuse me, the Cavs and the Trolls. So, yeah, I don't know. This deck it's good. I don't think it's one that I am going to necessarily consider playing for Atlanta. I mean, I've considered it, but I don't think it's necessarily high on my list. But just because I want to play a deck that maybe gains percentage in points in other matchups and loses some in other matchups, just because that's what you need to do to win a tournament, not necessarily have like 50-50 against everything, especially a tournament like the RC. So good deck. You know, I wouldn't fault people for playing it, but I don't think I'm gonna register it. So let's take a look at the next deck. All right, so this is kind of the premier aggressive deck of the format. This is Mono White Humans. This is pretty much what it says on the tin. It's 34 creatures and 4 Brave the Elements. They're all humans. Nothing too fancy going on. This deck is, I would say, you know, it's definitely a very good deck. I think that the Rakdos matchup is maybe a little tough, which is why you even see copies of Extraction Specialist main deck to kind of make up for that, which is not something you see too common. And then also, you know, the standard 4 copies of Wedding Announcement. The joke is that Rakdos can never beat this card. I think they can beat it, but it does make life a little difficult for them. As far as, you know, matchup spread is concerned, I think the Rakdos matchup can be tough game 1, maybe slightly better post board. This deck does have a good green matchup, so I think that is a good reason to play it. As far as Phoenix is concerned, that can be a little dicey game 1, but you have Rest in Peace in the sideboard, so maybe you gain percentage points enough in the post board games. But yeah, this deck, one of the main draws to playing this deck is the fact that it has a good mono green matchup. So again, if you expect the format, the room to be 25% mono green, you could do worse than registering mono white humans. And this is one of those things where, you know, even though you have bad matchups against some other decks, like maybe your matchup against Rakdos and Phoenix is bad, you have just you have draws that just put so much pressure on your opponent that sometimes it doesn't matter what their draw lines up as. You know, if the 1-drop and a double 1-drop into Thalia's Lieutenant, if they don't have the proper removal spells, they're just going to get buried by those draws, or even like sometimes turn 2 Thalia is very oppressive against a lot of strategies. So good deck for sure, good against mono green, maybe not the best against the more removal mid-range heavy decks, but solid choice overall, and definitely one on my list for choices for Atlanta as well. All right, 2 decks left. Last, or I guess second to last, excuse me, is it Phoenix? This is one of, I don't know if I would necessarily say this is one of my top choices right now, but I think this is a very good deck. This deck is weird because it kind of sometimes plays out like a mid-range deck where you're just exchanging these kind of like ops, and you're cantripping with shredders and, you know, kind of getting some pressure in that way. And then you're also using your, you know, fiery impulses, lightning axes. You have a lot of good removal here. So you can kind of tread water a little bit until those like huge setup turns where you just go 3 spells, 2 of which are Temporal Trespass and Galvanic Iteration, get back 2 Phoenixes, and all of a sudden you're attacking for 18 damage, and you just like kill your opponent out of nowhere. So this deck, very similar to Greasefang, I think has a lot of good Game 1 matchups. But as you can see, because we are playing, 4 copies of Arclight Phoenix and 5 Delve spells, along with 2 Flashback spells, Graveyard Hate gets a little dicey post-board. Now, obviously, because Graveyard Hate is well known, this deck does have plans for it. This list that I copied has Advances Blasting Cannons. I don't know about all that, but there's a Crackling Drake, Saheeli, Young Pyromancer. You could also look at the new Young Pyromancer, the Third Path Iconoclast, something you might want to consider for the sideboard. So, essentially, this deck, I think it's close against Rakdos. I've heard people say kind of back and forth. I've heard Phoenix is favored, I've heard Rakdos is favored. I think it's more of just a very close matchup. Graveyard Trespasser is kind of an issue, because if you discard or mill over Phoenix early and the Trespasser hits that, they get a +1 essentially out of the Trespasser because the Phoenix is gone, and they also get another +1 when you have to discard a card to kill the Trespasser inevitably. So be cognizant of that. I think mono green, this particular version might not have the best mono green matchup because there's only 1 copy of Thing in the Ice. So maybe if you're considering playing a Phoenix deck, you might want to have more copies of Thing in the Ice for that specific matchup, or maybe put them in the sideboard, because I do believe that is probably the best 2-drop against them. But overall, I think it is, like I said, I think it's good against mono white. I think it is decent against Greasefang because of the Lightning Axes and Fiery Impulses. I think it's pretty close against Rakdos. I think this, it's kind of close against mono green. You do have a lot of spot removal for the elves, so that is something you have going for you, but once they get a Karn in play, it's kind of difficult because they can get stuff like Godpharaoh Statue and Tormod's Crypt. Typical play pattern is Karn gets Crypt the turn that it's played to shut you off of a Delve spell. The next turn it gets a Statue to lock you out of the game. So be wary of that. But yeah, I think this is a fine deck, one that is certainly on my list of things to try. But the last deck, I think, is probably number 1 on my list, so let's take a look at that. Alright, so I've had a lot of people ask me over the past couple of days, Doomwake, what are you playing in Atlanta? What are you playing in Atlanta? And I have told them multiple times, if the tournament was tomorrow, this is what I would play. Now, thankfully for me, the tournament's not for another 4 or 5 days, so I got a little bit of time. But I do think this is my current frontrunner for Atlanta. I just played the Pioneer Challenge, not Modern. Pioneer Challenge today. I got 10th on Breakers, started off 5-0, lost a couple of rounds to bad matchups in the close. We'll discuss that. I think this deck has the best combination of aggression. Like, you have a lot of fast starts. You have 8 Elvish Mystics, 8 elves. And then the draws where you have turn 1 Elf, turn 2 Stormseeker, especially when you're on the play. If your opponent doesn't break up your Elf, you just put them so far behind because they're playing catch up every single turn, right? So you have these incredibly fast starts with Reckless Stormseeker. Even, sometimes a turn 2 Lovestruck Beast, just a turn 2 5/5 is good enough a lot of the time. So you have those really fast starts. You have decent removal. Obliterating Bolt is a massive upgrade to Lava Coil. This is just essentially a better version of Lava Coil because it hits Planeswalkers, which is massive because you can hit Karn. You can actually go after Kiora now and not feel bad about it. So that's a massive upgrade. This deck has a lot of good late game. You have 3 7-creature lands, 8 adventure spells, 4 Azeka's Chariots. You have a lot of these cards that generate multiple creatures, multiple pieces of advantage. You can go along with Rakdos. I think the Rakdos matchup is very good. And then I think you have a decent matchup against Mono Green because you have those fast starts. You have Obliterating Bolt for Gold Growth Troll, and then you also have the Akroan War in your main deck, which is a card that, can steal a Troll, can steal a Cavalier. You can do some cool stuff with, third chapter on the stack, crew a vehicle with the creature that you stole, and then the creature dies. I've done that a couple of times, so there's some really cool stuff with that. But I just think that this deck has the best combination of aggression, late game, and mid game. This is kind of just the best of all 3 worlds. So that's kind of why it's my front runner. As far as matchups are concerned, again, I think this deck is really good against Rakdos. I think I beat it 3 times in the challenge. I don't know exactly my overall record against Rakdos, but it's really good. The mono green matchup I think is favorable. Obviously, again, if you're on the draw, they can do mono green things. Sometimes you just can't do anything about that. because you don't have any one-mana removal spells like Strangle. But when you're, sometimes even on the draw, you can steal games with a Crowan War, especially if you have an Elf. Like, Elf into Stormseeker into a Crowan War is incredibly powerful because the thing that you steal has haste, so you can get a lot of pressure out of nowhere that way. So a deck that is good against Rakdos and good against Mono Green is a really good place to be, because I think those two decks will probably comprise, along with Phoenix. Now, I will say the Phoenix matchup I think is kind of tough. That is maybe one of the downsides to playing this. If you expect a lot of Phoenix, I would probably change the sideboard a little bit, because I think Unlicensed Hearse is a lot better than Scavenging Ooze against Phoenix, but I think Ooze is a lot better against Greasefang. So maybe it's better to split those as far as Graveyard Hate is concerned. But, if you're expecting Phoenix, I would recommend more Hearses. But yeah, this is, I think, just my number one deck. I think it's, I've been playing a ton of this deck over the past couple of weeks, and I really, really do think that this is one of, if not the best decks in the format right now. I mean, obviously, probably Mono Green's the actual best deck in the format, but I don't think I think this is a really close second for me. But yeah, that's kind of my Atlanta debriefing, or I guess briefing, well, maybe debriefing after the tournament itself. Again, I am working on a couple of decks in the lab. I don't want to necessarily reveal those yet because I've sworn to secrecy, but let's just say you're going to want to check out the content after Atlanta, because there's going to be some really sweet decks coming up. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you very much. Be sure to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comment section down below what your thoughts on Atlanta is. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.